What is the role of lay people in evangelization, especially in a rural context? Well, this is an exciting topic because I'm going to tell you the role of lay people is we're Arn, right? You and me, we're both Arn. Evangelization is not just father's job. And it's also not just sister's job. It's really all of our jobs. It's the job of all the baptized because it's a call that comes with our baptism to share the gospel as it's appropriate in our own state and life, in our own place. And it's a real privilege. This is not only the good news, it is the best news that has ever existed on the face of the universe. And God is asking us to share it with people who have either never heard it before or maybe just haven't heard it in the right way, to really open themselves up to the wonder and goodness of Jesus Christ. So, wow, it's a privilege and it's great stuff. But I do know that people tend to be pretty scared by this idea. Evangelization is a scary word in lots of contexts and situations, and it shouldn't be, but it is. Usually when people think of evangelization, they're aware of the Great Commission, which comes from the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 28. And it's actually Jesus' last words to us. He's ascending into heaven, and he says to the apostles and all those gathered, "Go and make disciples of all nations." And I love the Great Commission. I love the Great Commission, but I know that a lot of people hear that phrase, that sentence, "Go and make disciples of all nations," even though Jesus says at the end, "And lo, I will be with you always until the end of the age." That's reassurance. But even the apostles themselves were probably a little unnerved hearing that command, right? It's a command, go and make disciples of all nations. It's like, how am I going to do that? And we're asking the same thing. How are we going to do that? It's like, make disciples of all nations? It's like, I've never been outside of the United States, or whatever you're thinking. It's like there's all of a sudden all these roadblocks. Well, first off, the Lord doesn't give us a command unless he gives us the power to carry it out. So there's some good news right there. But also, it's not the only commission to evangelize that's in the gospel. It's like, I'm going to go ahead and share another one that people tend to hear better. It's not a different commission. It's the same one, but it does have a little bit of a twist on it. It feels more doable to people. And the evangelization you do is the evangelization that's going to work. Okay, we're going to move over to the Gospel of Mark. In the Gospel of Mark, at the beginning of chapter 5, there's a story that's called the narrative of the Gerasene demoniac. Okay, I'm going to unpack this just a little bit because we're moving towards verse 19. That's where the line is. Okay, but let's begin at the beginning. There's a man, and he is in dire straits. He is possessed by demons. He is living in a graveyard among the tombs. He is hurting himself with stones, wailing, seems to be without common sense or understanding. And some people have even tried to put a chain around him to keep him from hurting himself, and he broke through the chain. So this man is honestly in the midst of a living death. I mean, he's living in a graveyard, right? He's in this living death right now. And Jesus walks into that scene and casts the demons out of the man. And those demons then go at Jesus' order to the pigs that are grazing on the hillside. And the pigs, 2,000 of them, run down the hillside and jump into the sea and drown themselves. That must have been a scene. Now, that whole pigs drowning in the sea, 2,000 of them, really is meant to evoke how the Lord God saved the people of Israel from Pharaoh's army by crossing the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army, also 2,000, drowned. So just like the Lord God saved the Israelites for new life, Jesus Christ is saving this man who is a stand-in, a nameless stand-in for all of us for new life. Okay, wow, there's a lot going on in this story. I just love it. But we're still not at verse 19 yet. So what happens there? Well, the man is now healed. He's in his right mind, and he's calm. He's come back to his senses. He's clothed, and people are amazed. And what this man wants to do more than anything else is he wants to follow Jesus. So common. Every time that Jesus heals someone, they want to follow him. And so does he. But Jesus does something that he doesn't do any other time up to this point in the Gospel of Mark, and that is he says, no. No. Verse 19. You go back to your own people and tell them what the Lord in his mercy has done for you. Okay, you go back to your own people and tell them what the Lord in his mercy has done for you. And so the man accepts that, and he goes back to his people. Basically, the gospel says he began preaching about what Jesus had done for him in the Decapolis. That's a city, and it's a city full of pagans, right? They're not Jewish. So he is truly the first evangelist that we encounter in these gospels. It's amazing. But because the Gerasene demoniac is this nameless human being, whenever that happens in the gospels, it means that we're meant to stand in that person's place and hear the gospel from there. So when Jesus says, go and tell your own people what the Lord in his mercy has done for you, that is another commission. That is another commission. And it's one that we can understand and hear because we all have a story of God's goodness in our lives. We really do. If you're thinking, I'm not sure what that is, take a few moments, pause the video and say a prayer and ask the Lord to reveal that to you, because I'm positive you have more than one. And the Lord wants you to share that story with your own people. Now, who is that? Well, especially in a rural context, this is a little easier than it might be in many other places. It's certainly your circle of influence, first and foremost. Your circle of influence is going to be, first of all, your family. Okay? It's going to be your spouse. It's going to be your children. Whether the children are young or adult, you're called to be the first formators of your children. And sometimes we really read that as we need to teach our children the faith, and we do. But just as much, we need to share our own faith with our children, right? And we need to listen to them when they have real questions growing up in a very hard world where it's increasingly hard to be Christian. We need to listen to that and be able to respond that with encouragement and, with any kind of help and support that we can give. Or maybe it's a sibling, or maybe it's extended family. But that is our circle of influence. We witness to these people every day. So we can start there. But there's going to be other people in your circle of influence as well. Are there people at your workplace? Are there people at your own parish? Just because people are showing up and in the pew doesn't mean that they don't need to hear your story of how God has been good in your own life. Maybe it's just the thing they need to hear that day. Evangelization is not just for getting people who are not Christian to convert. Evangelization is sharing the story. It's sharing the good news, because we're all pilgrims on the way in this. We all have a ways to go. We need to be sharing these stories with each other. And in a rural context, in some ways, that is easier because we do have these bridges of trust in place. We know each other, and we know each other's pains and difficulties, and we can insert our story in there. That could be a real sign of hope and encouragement in new faith for lots of people. So maybe that is your Great Commission. That is your call to evangelization. And if we all did that, not only our parish would be vibrant and, renewed in all kinds of really important ways that have to do with discipleship, I would say our entire town and region would be renewed. It's an amazing call. And I encourage you right now to lean into it and make Mark 5:19 your own.